The first and greatest superhero who ever lived. We're exploring the origins of Superman today on Comicology. Now, everybody knows, or at least it's widely understood, that the world's first superhero is the Phantom. But I don't believe in that stuff. In my opinion, the world's first superhero is definitely Superman. Without a doubt, because he suits the Golden Age era so much better than the Phantom does. I believe that the Phantom is clearly a Pulp Age character and follows those tropes much better than he does in the Golden Age. For Superman, his influence on the medium cannot be understated. There are so many Golden Age tropes that can be directly attributed to the debut of Superman. His costume with the underwear and the cape. We're talking about his secret identity as a mild-mannered human. His relationship with his damsel in distress love interest. His constant pursuit of greater world good. And of course his innate sort of supernatural powers. You have to consider it for the time. Back in 1938, Superman was essentially an amalgam of what other characters were doing, but with a tremendous moral twist. The Pulp Age was all about these hard-driven characters who had grit. Characters like Doc Savage and the Shadow and Zorro. People who fought injustice, but they didn't have the moral center that Superman had. Think of it like this. Superman is a hero of the people. His primary goal is to rid the world of injustice, and he has the supernatural abilities to get the job done. In fact, many of his early adventures seem to run on the principle of this sort of like wish fulfillment, maybe perhaps even on the role of the author as his wish fulfillment. They were designed specifically to entertain the notion of hope where previously there was no hope. So consider the origin. It's 1938. America had just come out of the Great Depression, and there was a sudden swelling of underprivileged people located in these massive major metropolitan cities such as New York. And many of them survived through hopeless situations. Many of them were also immigrants from other countries. This was the perfect audience for a character like Superman, who was an immigrant, who happened to possess great power and used that power to protect the underprivileged. This was a great way for less fortunate people to momentarily escape their harsh realities, and the number one reason why I think a widely understood reason why Superman became such a tremendous phenomenon. You have to understand, it can't be understated. Superman is the first superhero. I'm saying it. I'm going to go and say it. Forget the Phantom. Superman is the first superhero. He birthed the culture. He gave birth to the superhero genre. And I don't think it's overstating his importance to say that he is the reason why the superhero genre evolved the way that it has today. You know, he was the originator and he paved the way for everything that we have now. But anyway, without further ado, allow me to explain the origin of the greatest superhero who's ever lived. Talking about Superman. So, on the surface, as is true with a lot of good origins, Superman's origins are deceptively simple. Essentially, Superman is an alien from the planet Krypton who is gifted at birth with tremendous superpowers, but unfortunately his planet has a doomed biosphere and ends up exploding. Superman is the sole survivor and escapes in a rocket to Earth and is now the sole living Kryptonian. His shuttle lands on Earth and is discovered by the Kent family. They take the child in and name him Clark. Then they adopt him as their own. They show him kindness and raise him to adulthood while instilling within him a sense of righteousness that he should use his abilities to help mankind. As Clark grows, he learns all about his powers, including his incredible strength, speed, and the ability to leap far distances. But unfortunately, the Kents pass away from old age, leaving Clark alone. At this point, he decides to live out their idea of truth, justice, and the American way as Superman, the defender of the people. So that's the origin in a nutshell. It's kind of basic. This is, or it was, the story as it was told in Superman #1, but was eventually expanded upon in other issues. Allow me to explain. The truth is that Superman's biological parents are actually Kryptonian scientists, Jor-El and his wife Laura, and his real name is actually Kal-El, not Clark Kent. Superman began life on Krypton with his parents. He was happy and a very active baby, but at the time Krypton suffered from massive landquakes, which were becoming more and more frequent. It seemed the planet was soon to be doomed. Jor-El was a member of the Kryptonian Science Council and discovered that the planet would soon collapse in on itself due to its uranium core. But they refused to listen to him. As a result, Jor-El decided that the only thing they can do is try and escape. Jor-El had built a small rocket with enough power to reach the third planet in the Sol system, the planet we know as Earth. Unfortunately, it's too small for them to escape together, so they decide to send Kal-El alone. I often wonder why they didn't just build a bigger rocket, but I don't know, that's the story as it's told. It's just best not to think about it, I guess. Superman's parents sacrifice themselves to jettison him into space. Fortunately, he makes the trip without a problem and lands safely on Earth, where he is found by the Kents of Smallville. They rescue young Kal-El from the burning space pod and bring him home. The Kents adopt Kal and rename him Clark. They quickly discover he has supernatural powers, but they're surprisingly okay with the situation. The Clarks are remarkably open to the idea of having a superpowered son, and as a result, Clark thrives in their care. Eventually, they pass away, and Clark decides to move to Metropolis to find work at the Daily Star, but is immediately rejected due to lack of experience. This is when Clark decides to make his debut as Superman. He gets a tip about a lynch mob at the county jail and decides to investigate. Superman has no problem stopping the lynch mob. He just sort of flies in and tells them to stop doing what they're doing. They try to overpower him, but because he looks kind of foolish and they've never seen him before, of course he's Superman, and it doesn't work. Nobody is going to get the best of Superman, and what's more, Superman discovers that the man they're going to lynch is actually innocent. He's being framed for murder. Superman discovers that the real killer is a female singer at a local nightclub. He wants to investigate further, but first he calls up the editor at the Daily Star and shares the scoop. He gets the job and then heads over to the nightclub to interrogate the singer. But it's actually fairly simple. She incriminates herself actually pretty easily. She admits to committing the murders and tries to shoot Superman with a pistol. But as said before, he's Superman, so that doesn't work. Then he intimidates her into writing her own confession and takes her to the governor's mansion in order to put a stop to the false execution. At first, they won't let Superman into the governor's mansion, but he just sort of smashes his way through the door, forces his way in, and the governor is there, obviously very shocked. He presents the signed confession with just enough time to halt the execution. He returns to work the next day to find that the night's events have become a huge local news story, but oddly enough, Superman's involvement isn't even mentioned. So that's it. That's Superman's first ever assignment while acting as the Man of Steel, and it was relatively simple. He just sort of uncovers this piece of corruption incited by this incredibly selfish woman, and ultimately he saves a man who is wrongfully accused, which falls directly in line with the theme of bringing hope to the hopeless. Ultimately, overall, I think it is a fitting beginning to Superman, if not necessarily the most ideal debut. At least at the beginning of his career, Superman was not interested in these sort of like big, flashy, world-ending cases. He would eventually become known for that super spectacle stuff. But as of now, it didn't really interest him. All he wanted was to make life better for the common man, and that's what he focused on mostly at first. But of course, we are not done yet. Now that Superman was established as a hero, and achieved his secret identity at the Daily Star, next he would meet a very special woman in his life. This is the story of how he met Lois Lane. The next day, Clark reports to work, and his editor assigns him to the Superman story. It becomes his job to uncover the secret identity of Superman, who is in actuality just himself. But on his way out of work, he meets Lois Lane, and he is instantly enamored with her. He asks her out almost immediately on a date, and she sort of reluctantly agrees. Unfortunately, on their date, Lois isn't having a very good time, and some roughhousers come over and cut in on Clark's dance with her. They steal her away, but she isn't having it, and she retaliates by slapping one of the guys in the face. Then she runs off, but the troublemakers follow after her. They catch Lois Lane, but Clark changes into Superman and chases after them. He catches up to the car and lifts it into the air, shaking everybody inside. Then he rescues Lois Lane and smashes the remains of the car into the side of a mountain, in this homage to the world-famous cover from Action Comics #1. With the bad guys defeated, Superman scoops up Lois and he literally runs her home. She is amazed by his abilities and enamored by his charm, but of course she doesn't care for Clark Kent, especially after having met Superman. The next day at work, Lois is pretty upset with Clark, but she is also distracted. She's daydreaming about Superman without realizing they are actually the same person. Of course, this is just the beginning of their now legendary relationship, which would eventually end with her aware of Superman's alter ego and even agreeing to marry Clark Kent, eventually. So that's it. Those are the basics of Superman's origins, except you'll notice, specifically in these stories, the way that they're told, they do skip a fair bit of the narrative. First of all, we didn't learn much of anything about Superman's childhood. It starts with his birth. We get details there, and then it skips almost everything and gets quickly into his adulthood when he actually becomes Superman. And the reason why we don't learn so much about Superman as a child is because this would later be covered in an alternate title called Superboy. For those who don't know, Superboy in modern continuity is actually a separate character apart from Superman. But for the purposes of the Golden Age, you can consider Superboy and Clark Kent to be the same person. Superboy is Clark Kent as he existed in his early years in Smallville, as he went on early adventures and learned to sort of master his powers. Having said that, this origin is not actually his very first adventure. As continuity would continue, Superman would have adventures retconned all the way back to when he was a baby, being transported in his pod, you know, all the way back to when he was living in a space pod traveling to Earth. But for now, this is what we have to work with. So now let's take a minute to talk about the mythology of the character, starting with his superpowers. Superman has superpowers. He has superpowers because he is a Kryptonian. He has Kryptonian physiology. In the Golden Age, it was misunderstood that all Kryptonians had these gifts by virtue of being part of such a tremendously advanced race beyond what humans could comprehend. They were essentially gods. They were meant to be that in the narrative. And they died because of their hubris, with Superman being the only one left and sort of given to humanity as a gift. Well, that was the idea at first. In the original continuity, Superman had tremendous strength, speed, and the ability to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Okay? But that was it. He didn't have any other abilities like that. He was just physically the most powerful thing on Earth. But as time went on, he would discover he had an even more diverse set of abilities. It was like, as a Kryptonian, he never understood what he was capable of until he would discover it. So one day he would discover that he had heat vision. One day he would discover that he had ice breath. One day he would discover that he could see through walls. He had super hearing. And most importantly was the day he discovered to fly. This was actually a common thing that happened a lot in the Silver Age. A lot of Silver Age Superman stories involved him discovering some crazy new Kryptonian power that he had. Like, at one point he had like a color ray and he could change the color of things. At one point he had the ability to create a miniature version of himself with all of his own powers. You know, it's weird stuff. But Superman's most premier trait is, of course, his strength. He's gifted with the ability to lift up to 100 tons. That's about 100 tons too. That's 200,000 pounds. You know, for reference, the average car weighs what, 2 or 3 tons, so he can lift about 30 cars comfortably. You know, or what is that? 26 trucks, something like 20 tractors. You know, let's see. Oh, I work with diesels. Superman could probably at a 200,000. He probably that's 7. He could lift 7 fully loaded diesel trucks without any effort. It's crazy. Superman is also invulnerable to most forms of damage. Conventional human weapons, including blunt, sharp objects, firearms, flames, explosives, and acids, are all useless against him. Occasionally, Superman can be slowed down with the application of supersonic sound waves, which confuse his powerful senses, or large sums of electricity, or sub-zero freezing temperatures, which have been known to slow him down, but cannot stop him. There are only 2 things in the whole existence of the universe that are capable of hurting Superman. The first one is, oddly enough, magical energies. Superman is supremely weak to all forms of magic. Anybody who practices any form of magic has the potential to harm Superman. That's a tremendous weakness, but not as tremendous as the second thing. The second thing that can harm Superman is kryptonite. Kryptonite being, at least in this continuity, irradiated chunks of his home planet of Krypton, which sort of drifted through space and landed on Earth, and people used them to sort of harm Superman. They sort of have the same effect that radiation exposure would have on a human. He becomes frail and sick, and after extended exposure, it's never happened, but in theory, Superman would die after extended exposure. Also, another weakness that Superman has is because of the incredible power of his superhuman body. His mind is actually fairly weak compared to other heroes. He's actually pretty basic. Superman utilizes extremely one-dimensional thinking in almost everything he does. Therefore, Superman is very easily tricked. He is very easily manipulated. Often his greatest challenges come from his more mentally capable enemies, such as Lex Luthor. They outweigh him intellectually, and they exist in a morally gray area where Superman dare not tread, and that makes them a huge threat to him. And then on the other hand of the spectrum, we have Superman's alter ego of Clark Kent. Clark is an accomplished farmer with years of experience raising livestock and maintaining crops. He also has a master's in journalism, which he uses to provide a modest life for himself. His education focuses mostly on humanities, such as politics and literature. Unfortunately, Clark lacks really any other skills that a well-rounded human being would have. I'm guessing because of his tremendous superpowers, he just really hasn't learned to do things on his own. So other characters like Batman or Captain America extremely outweigh him in terms of skills and training. As far as Clark is concerned, aside from his investigative journalism and his writing ability, he lacks any sort of combat training. He doesn't have any leadership skills. He doesn't have any tactical awareness. He's not very mentally strong, and he's completely unaware. He lacks awareness of like all of science, all of industry. He doesn't know how businesses work or how infrastructure sort of relates. Like, he's completely unaware of all the things that humans would normally be into because he's not. Also, in many continuities, he's very bad with money. So, here's the thing. As far as I can tell, Superman represents an idea, like many heroes, as the best of what humanity has to offer. In many ways, this is the truth of the character. He was idealized as what people at the time considered to be the best human, a veritable Superman, if you will. But I'm not so sure that that's true anymore. Lately, in pop culture, Superman is being represented as an inadequate solution to the world's modern problems. Modern comics tackle the idea of the validity of the Superman in a world of moral gray areas. There was even a movie where he snapped a dude's neck for some reason. Isn't that weird? Like, why would Superman do that? The truth of this character is that Superman is so ridiculously powerful that he does not have to do evil things. He doesn't have to do things like that. He doesn't have to snap people's necks. He doesn't have to burn people alive. He doesn't have to do those things because he has no desire to do those things, because he doesn't feel insecurity. You know, he's completely secure in himself. Only frail humans have a need to validate themselves by causing pain to others. And that, above everything else, is what makes Superman so special. Not only does he not want to do bad things, but because of his tremendous power, he doesn't have to. This is why most of his comics deal with correcting human errors instead of his own. Because in many ways, he's kind of perfect. The human behavior in his comics are inherently flawed because it's often selfish and therefore counterproductive. This is something that Superman recognizes and corrects, since Superman is the apex of humanity and he has the authority on what works and what doesn't. For Superman, everything is simple. That's why he has such one-dimensional thinking, because for Superman it's all simple. You just do the right thing. Because why wouldn't you? And if you don't, he'll kick your ass, which is always a thing. It's almost authoritarian when you look at it. But upon close inspection, there's a bit more subtlety in the way Superman punishes people. In a way, Superman is privy to give you exactly what you want. The irony is that when they achieve what they want, they are horrified as if they were expecting some kind of different outcome, as if they were in denial. And it's kind of genius how Superman operates by letting people sort of destroy themselves. Like, a being with all this power wouldn't need to crush you. They just let you crush yourself. For example, in his very next adventure, Superman went to the Republic state of San Monte. Some crazy country in a civil war, tons of people dying, right? And there's these two dictators, right? But instead of fighting to end the war, he just goes and he grabs the dictators and he flies them off to this isolated location and he puts them in a pit and he tells them, here you go, fight it out. And those dictators are staring at each other like, we don't want to fight, you know? And suddenly, miraculously, when they're faced with the truth of what they've been doing, they decide that they don't want to do it anymore. It's almost like Superman is so basic that in a way he knows something that humans don't. And that's what makes him a superhero. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Superman would, of course, go on a few more adventures after this, where he would tackle some big social issues which were happening at the time, and eventually he would come across his very first actual legitimate supervillain. Maybe the first true supervillain in the world, maybe the first true supervillain in comic book history. But that's for next time. For now, we need to go meditate on the simple nature of Superman and how in many ways it's a superior philosophy to our complex human nature. Yeah. So yeah, if you liked doing this with me and you would like to read some more comics with me, why not subscribe to my channel? If you really liked it, you can like the video so that I get more, traction with the algorithm. Or if you're really generous, why not share it with one of your friends? Maybe you know somebody who likes comics. And if you really, really want to support the channel, I do make comic books myself. This one is called Vigilance. This is my first book. It's about a vigilante in New York who is very dangerous, but is of course holding a secret. It is very interesting. If you would please buy issue 1, because I'm actually on my way to making issue 2. It's almost done. It's going to be released very soon. But thank you all for watching. If you want more updates on everything that I've said, you can follow me on Facebook. Otherwise, I'm going to leave links for everything in the description. I have got to go, but I will see you next time. Bye.